I need to tell you something about your morning routine that almost nobody in the medical world is saying out loud. There is something that millions of people are adding to their coffee every single morning. Something that sits right next to the coffee machine on the kitchen counter. Something that looks completely ordinary. And for most of your life, it probably was fine. But after a certain age, that one thing you are stirring into your cup before you have even had your first meal of the day may be quietly doing serious damage to the arteries that keep your heart beating and your body alive. I am Dr. James Harlan. I have spent over 2 decades as a cardiologist. I have sat across from patients who did everything right. They exercised, they watched their weight, they took their medications without missing a single dose, and yet their arteries were stiffening ahead of schedule. Their blood pressure was creeping up. The circulation to their legs and their heart was not what it should have been. And when I started asking detailed questions about their daily habits, the answer kept appearing in the same place. Not in their dinner, not in their weekend treats, in their morning coffee. Now, I want to be very clear with you before we go any further. Coffee itself is not the enemy. In fact, real research, not the kind funded by supplement companies but peer-reviewed studies published in major journals, shows that black coffee consumed in moderate amounts is actually one of the better things you can do for your cardiovascular system. It is rich in antioxidants. It supports healthy blood pressure when consumed correctly. It has been linked in multiple studies to a reduced risk of heart disease and stroke. So this is not a video telling you to give up your coffee. Please keep drinking your coffee. But what you are putting into it and what you are eating alongside it, that is an entirely different conversation. And it is one that I believe every adult over the age of 55 deserves to have. So stay with me through this entire video because before we are done, I am going to name the specific thing that I believe is doing the most damage inside the arteries of older coffee drinkers. And I am going to tell you what you can do instead starting tomorrow morning. I am also going to share with you 2 things you can add to your coffee that are genuinely working in your favor. Things that most people never think about, things that are sitting in most kitchens already and that can quietly start protecting your heart from the inside out, 1 cup at a time. Let us start with something that I think will genuinely surprise you. The first thing I want you to consider adding to your morning coffee is cinnamon. Real cinnamon. A small pinch, maybe half a teaspoon, stirred in before you take your first sip. Now, I know that sounds almost too simple to matter, but I want to explain to you exactly what is happening inside your body when you do this because the mechanism is real and the research behind it is solid. Here is the problem that a lot of older adults are dealing with, and that most of them do not connect to their heart. As you get older, your body becomes gradually less efficient at managing blood sugar. Even people who are not diabetic, even people who have never had any warning about blood sugar in their lives. After the age of 55 or 60, the body's sensitivity to insulin, the hormone that manages where your blood sugar goes, starts to decline quietly. And every morning when you have your first cup of coffee, especially if you are adding anything sweet to it, your blood sugar takes a sharp little climb. Now, 1 spike is not the problem. The problem is that this happens every single morning for years. Day after day, that blood sugar climbs and then crashes. And each time it does, it sends a low-level wave of inflammation through your arteries. Think of your arteries like a smooth, flexible pipe. When they are healthy, blood slides through them easily, carrying oxygen and nutrients to your heart, your brain, your legs. But chronic blood sugar spikes, repeated over months and years, start to damage the inner lining of those pipes. Small nicks, small points of inflammation, and the body, trying to repair that damage, starts laying down plaque. That plaque hardens over time. The pipe gets narrower, and one morning, without any warning, the pressure in that narrowed pipe becomes more than it can handle. Cinnamon has been shown in multiple human studies to help slow the rate at which your blood sugar rises after a meal or a drink. It does this by improving how well your cells respond to insulin, essentially helping your body do its job more efficiently. A smaller spike after your morning coffee means less inflammatory damage to your arterial walls. Less inflammatory damage over months and years means arteries that stay more flexible, more open, more alive. That is not a small thing. That is the difference between arteries that keep serving you well into your 80s and arteries that are silently narrowing while you think everything is fine. You can get cinnamon at any grocery store for a few dollars. Ceylon cinnamon, sometimes called true cinnamon, is the variety most commonly used in the research and is gentler on the digestive system if you are having it daily. Half a teaspoon in your morning coffee. No sugar, no fancy preparation, just that one small act repeated morning after morning becomes a quiet act of protection for the arteries you depend on every single day. Now, before I get to the second thing you can add to your coffee, I want to take a moment because I think it is important. I work with patients who are frustrated, and I understand why. They are doing so much right. They are checking their numbers. They are going to their appointments. They are asking the right questions. And sometimes, in spite of all of that effort, things are still slowly moving in the wrong direction. And what I find again and again is that it is not a failure of effort. It is a failure of information. The right information simply never reached them. Nobody sat down and connected the dots between the specific things happening in their kitchen every morning and what was showing up in their arteries years later. That connection is what I am trying to give you today. The second thing worth adding to your morning coffee is unsweetened cocoa powder. Real cocoa. Not hot chocolate mix, not the sweetened powder, but pure unsweetened cocoa, the kind with nothing added. Just a small amount, about a teaspoon, stirred into your coffee, along with the cinnamon if you like. And here is why this matters so much for your arteries specifically. Cocoa contains a group of compounds called flavanols, and flavanols do something remarkable inside your blood vessels. They stimulate the production of nitric oxide. You may remember that word from conversations about circulation. Nitric oxide is a molecule that tells your blood vessel walls to relax, to open up, to become more flexible. Wider blood vessels mean that your heart does not have to work as hard to push blood through them. Lower resistance means lower blood pressure. And for older adults whose arteries are gradually stiffening, anything that helps restore flexibility to those vessels is deeply valuable. There was a large study conducted in Europe that followed tens of thousands of adults over a period of years. Those who consumed higher amounts of flavanol-rich cocoa had measurably lower rates of heart attack and cardiovascular death than those who did not. That is not a small result. That is the kind of finding that, in a different world, would be on the front page of every newspaper in the country. A teaspoon of unsweetened cocoa powder in your morning coffee. It adds a depth of flavor that many people find they actually prefer over time. and your arteries are receiving something that genuinely helps them stay open, flexible, and working the way they were designed to work. Now, I have to stop here because we are about to get to the part of this video that I really need you to hear. We have talked about two things that are quietly working in your favor when added to coffee, and I hope that has given you something useful to start with tomorrow morning. But the reason I titled this video the way I did is because what I am about to tell you is the other side of that story. And it is the side that, in my experience as a cardiologist, is causing far more damage than most people realize. There are things that millions of older adults are putting in their morning coffee, things they have been using for years, things they consider completely harmless, that are doing serious, measurable harm to the arteries that keep them alive. And I want to go through them with you right now because if you are using any of these, stopping or replacing them may be one of the most important things you do for your heart this year. Not a new medication, not a new exercise program. A change that happens in your kitchen before your day even begins. The first thing you need to be careful about is non-dairy coffee creamer. The kind in the powder or the liquid bottle. The kind that has been in kitchens for decades and that a huge number of people over 60 use every single morning because they are avoiding dairy or because they like the taste, or simply because it is what they have always done. And I want to explain to you exactly what is in that creamer and exactly what it is doing inside your arteries, because once you understand this, you will not look at that bottle the same way again. Most commercial non-dairy creamers, especially the older and less expensive varieties, are built on a foundation of partially hydrogenated oils. Sometimes the label calls them hydrogenated vegetable oils, or you will see ingredients like sodium caseinate, corn syrup solids, or mono and diglycerides. What these ingredients have in common is that they are forms of artificial trans fats or compounds that behave similarly inside the body. And trans fats are, without exaggeration, among the most damaging things a human being can consume when it comes to arterial health. Here is what happens. When trans fats enter your bloodstream, they do two things simultaneously that are both deeply harmful. First, they raise your LDL cholesterol, the kind that contributes to the buildup of plaque inside your arteries. Second, and this is the part that is less talked about, they lower your HDL cholesterol, the good cholesterol, the kind that actually helps clear that plaque away. So they are pushing in a harmful direction from both sides at once. They are building up what should not be there while removing what should be. And they are doing this every morning, in your coffee, while you think you are starting the day right. Think of your arteries like a river. A healthy river runs clear, moves freely, and has the current to carry debris downstream and out. Trans fats are like a combination of things that cloud the water, slow the current, and then add material to the riverbed at the same time. Over years, that riverbed builds up, the river narrows, and one day, what was a wide-open channel is now barely a trickle. That is what arterial plaque buildup looks like in a real human body. And non-dairy creamer is one of the lesser discussed contributors to exactly that process. Now, I know some of you are thinking, but I have been using it for 20 years and I feel fine. And I want to address that directly because it is one of the most dangerous thoughts in cardiovascular medicine. Arterial disease does not announce itself. There is no alarm that goes off when the plaque starts building. There is no pain, no warning, no daily reminder that something is narrowing. The first sign that something is very wrong is sometimes a heart attack, sometimes a stroke. And by that point, the damage that accumulated silently over years has already done what it came to do. The silence is the danger, not the symptoms. If you are currently using non-dairy creamer, I want you to consider making a change. A small splash of whole milk or a bit of real cream in moderate amounts is actually less harmful than the trans fat compounds in most non-dairy alternatives. A small amount of unsweetened oat milk or almond milk with no additives is also a reasonable option. These are not perfect choices either, but they are meaningfully better than what is sitting in that creamer bottle. The second thing I need to warn you about is something that has been marketed for decades as a healthier alternative to sugar: artificial sweeteners. Specifically the kind found in the pink, blue, and yellow packets that have been on every restaurant table and in every coffee station for as long as most of us can remember: saccharin, aspartame, sucralose. The ones that were supposed to give you the sweetness without the consequences. I want to be very honest with you about what the research is now showing because it has changed significantly in recent years, and most people have not heard about it. New research, including a very large study published in a major cardiovascular journal in the last few years, found that people who consumed higher amounts of artificial sweeteners had a meaningfully elevated risk of heart attack and stroke compared to those who did not use them. Now, science is complicated, and a single study does not tell the whole story. But the growing body of research on artificial sweeteners and cardiovascular health is pointing in a direction that I believe every older adult needs to know about. Here is the part that is most relevant to your arteries specifically. Artificial sweeteners appear to disrupt the delicate balance of bacteria in your gut and the health of your gut microbiome. The trillions of bacteria living in your digestive system is now understood to have a direct connection to the health of your arteries. A disrupted gut microbiome produces more inflammatory compounds that travel through the bloodstream. And as we have already discussed, chronic arterial inflammation is the engine that drives plaque buildup, stiffening, and narrowing over time. You thought you were making the safe choice with that little packet, but your gut and your arteries may have been telling a different story this whole time. If you need a touch of sweetness in your coffee, a very small amount of real honey, or even just allowing yourself to adjust slowly to the natural bitterness of coffee over time, is a better path for your cardiovascular system. Real sugar in very small amounts is not ideal, but it is metabolized in a way that your body has evolved to handle over millions of years. The synthetic compounds in those little packets are something else entirely, and your arteries are bearing the cost. Now, we have arrived at the third thing. And this is the one that I want you to really sit with because it is the most common, the most invisible, and in my opinion, the most quietly damaging habit in the morning routine of older adults across this country. The third thing is this: drinking your coffee alongside a highly processed, high glycemic breakfast. Specifically, the combination of coffee, especially sweetened coffee, paired with white toast, sweetened cereal, a store-bought muffin, a pastry, or a bagel. This combination, which describes the morning routine of tens of millions of people over the age of 60, creates a blood sugar spike that is not just bad for your waistline. It is directly, measurably harmful to your arteries in a way that compounds with every single morning it is repeated. Here is why the combination matters more than either part alone. Caffeine on its own, even in black coffee, causes a temporary and mild rise in blood sugar and blood pressure. That effect is small, and the cardiovascular benefits of the antioxidants in coffee generally outweigh it. But when you pair that caffeine spike with a high glycemic food, the two effects amplify each other. Your blood sugar climbs higher and faster than it would from either alone. The insulin response is sharper, the inflammatory signal to your arteries is stronger, and then comes the crash, and that crash sends its own stress signal to your cardiovascular system. Your cortisol rises briefly, your blood pressure fluctuates, and your arterial walls absorb all of it quietly, without complaint, day after day after day. I think about the person who has had the same breakfast for 30 years. Toast and coffee, maybe a bowl of sweetened oatmeal and coffee, maybe a muffin grabbed on the way out the door and a large sweetened coffee to go with it. They are not doing anything wrong by any standard they were ever given. Nobody sat them down and explained that this specific combination, repeated every single morning, was creating a low-grade inflammatory stress on their cardiovascular system that was slowly narrowing the arteries they need most. The fix is not complicated. It does not require expensive food or elaborate cooking. It requires pairing your morning coffee with protein and fat instead of sugar and refined carbs, 2 eggs, a small handful of nuts, a piece of cheese, and some sliced vegetables. Foods that release their energy slowly and steadily. Foods that do not send your blood sugar on the same sharp climb that sets off the inflammatory cascade in your arterial walls. That one change to what is on the plate next to your coffee cup could, over months and years, meaningfully change what is happening inside the arteries that keep your heart beating. I want to take a moment here and just speak to you honestly, the way I try to speak to every patient who sits in my office. I know that health information can feel overwhelming. I know that some mornings you are just trying to get through the morning. You are not thinking about nitric oxide or trans fats or glycemic indices. You are just making the coffee that has always been there and eating what is comfortable and familiar. I understand that. And I am not here to make you feel that your habits are a failure or that you have done something wrong. What I am here to tell you is that your arteries are living tissue. They respond to what you give them. They are not locked into a fixed destiny. I have seen patients in their late 60s and 70s make consistent small changes to what they consume. Not dramatic overhauls, not expensive protocols, just steady, quiet improvements to the specific inputs their cardiovascular system receives every morning. And I have watched their numbers shift in ways that surprised even them. Blood pressure that had been creeping up begins to stabilize. Circulation that had been sluggish begins to improve. Energy that had been declining begins to return. The arteries want to stay open. The heart wants to keep beating strong. They are working for you every second of every day without asking anything in return. What they are asking for, if we are being honest, is that we stop quietly undermining them with the very first choice we make each morning. You have the right to know this. You have the right to make your morning coffee a moment that is actually working in your favor instead of silently against you. A pinch of cinnamon, a teaspoon of real cocoa, real milk instead of processed creamer, water instead of that pink packet, eggs instead of a muffin. These are not sacrifices. These are small acts of loyalty to the body that has carried you this far, and that is asking quietly for a little more support. The human heart is extraordinary. It beats over 100,000 times a day without being asked. It has been doing that since before you were born. It is doing it right now as you watch this. And the arteries that supply it with the blood it needs to keep going. Those arteries are influenced in real and measurable ways by what happens in your kitchen every single morning. You still have the power to make those mornings count. Not perfectly, not dramatically, just consistently, a little better than before. I am Dr. James Harlan. If this information helped you or someone you love, please share this video and subscribe for more honest, practical guidance on protecting your heart as you age. I will see you in the next one. Take care of your heart. It has never stopped taking care of you.